So we're going to do a new build scenario on the 2015 model. What this scenario is going to look like is we're going to be looking at the East Bay over here, and we're going to be building out a new link from Ballast Point to East Tampa, just to see the path flows and have a nice extreme example of how they would shift. So we're going to build out a link as if we were going to build a bridge or a tunnel or something like that that kind of bypasses that downtown route across the bay. And what we're going to focus on is talking about building out the links, adding new nodes and things like that, as well as opening up or closing off specific turn movements within the network. So you can see what that looks like as well. Okay. A little bit more detail, we're going to be on one side of the bridge, we're going to be adding an interchange. So we're going to be looking at how do we create some of these on-ramps, off-ramps, and it also gives us an opportunity to do some one-way links as well as some two-way links. And then on the other side of the bridge, we're just going to be connecting it to the existing node network, so you can see what that looks like as well. Okay, so to get started, what we're going to do is we're just going to open up the 2022 build scenario. If this isn't in the example files download, then you could just open up the 2015 init. Basically what I've done here is I've just created a copy of that 2015 initial scenario and just called it a 2022 build scenario. So that's what we're going to start with. We're going to open that up in Visum, and then we're going to go ahead and make sure that we save it as a new version, so that way we aren't overriding the original version. In this build scenario, there are objects called points of interest. Now, points of interest can be used for a variety of uses in Visum. For training purposes, I like to use them as indicators as to where we're going to be building and kind of the line courses and stuff like that. So we'll see points of interest there, but you can utilize points of interest for a lot of different opportunities. You can have single points of interest. You can have points of interest that represent a line or a course through the network. You can also have a point of interest that's a geometric space, so representing something like a park or a bay or something like that. So we have a special graphic parameter file that will highlight the points of interest for us that we're going to be loading into the network scenario. So we'll just drag and drop that onto our new build scenario. And that should, once we read in all the graphic parameters, that should allow us to see the points of interest, and we're going to utilize those points of interest as a reference for our build scenario as we're building out the links and the nodes and all of those different types of objects. What this build is going to look like, I'm going to lay out what we're going to kind of do to start, and then I'll jump into Visum, and actually we'll spend some time in Visum working. So the first thing that we're going to do is jump in and we're going to create new nodes where they need to go. So this will involve a couple different things. First, we'll need to take the existing link structures and split them up to offer new places for junctions to occur. So there's going to be an existing link for this Highway 41, and we're going to split it up in these 4 locations to add new junction points for our on-ramps and off-ramps. And in order to do that, you just need to select the links objects and then right click on the links themselves. And then that will give you an option to split the link. When you split the link, then you'll specify where do you want that new junction to occur. And then you can add in new node points in addition to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over into Visum. I'm going to open up my Visum file. And again, this is just a copy of the 2015 version. So what you can do is if you have the 2015 version opened up, you just hit Save As, and then you can just save it as 2022 build, or maybe a training, or give it some unique name, and then you can open up the build version. And again, Adam has provided links in the chat. So if you're looking for those download links, again, please find them in the chat there, and you can download the files. There is a run file as well as an unrun file. For this purpose, you can download just the unrun file because the one with paths and things like that is like 2 gigabytes. It's going to be a big download. Okay, so once you have your new base model version set up like this, so we've saved it as a build option. The first step we're going to do is we want to be able to see those points of interest. We can just turn them on by activating the layer. But we also have a graphic parameter that will turn off some of the other graphic parameters as well. So in the graphics folder, you should be able to find, if you scroll all the way down, we should have a training new build graphic parameter file. And all you have to do is drag and drop that onto Visum, or you can go File, Open File, Graphic Parameters, and open up the graphic parameters file that way as well. We're just going to read all graphic parameters once we've opened up that GPA file. What this will do is this will zoom in on the location of the build. It will also highlight the points of interest. It'll turn off some of those link bars, and it will change the colors of the nodes and the links in such a way that makes it kind of easier to visualize everything and edit the network as needed. So I'm going to give you all a moment. And you can see how we're going to be building here. Okay. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to need to make sure that we can add new links to the network by creating junction points on the existing network. So if we zoom in on this eastern side of the new build, we can see that we have existing link structures here that we can utilize. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have the links object selected. And on these link structures, we're going to be splitting these links. So make sure you have the links object highlighted. And then we can right click on the link that we want to split. So for example, if we wanted to add a junction for this on-ramp right here, we can right click and on the link and say split link here. This will create a little intermediate point with a dashed line. And you can see how it snaps to the link. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this right where I want my junction to be. So I'm just going to left click at that location. And it'll say the resulting assignment will be deleted. That's okay. We're doing a new build, so we're going to hit yes to confirm. And now you should see that we have split this link and created a point that is available for the junction. At the next off-ramp point, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to split the link right there. In this case, since this highway is modeled as one set of links as opposed to two one-way links, it doesn't matter if you're selecting the northbound or the southbound side. So here we have another junction. Right click, I'm going to hit split and add a node right there. And then we have another junction for this on-ramp over here, split right there. So temporarily, if I turn off my points of interest and select nodes, we have a node for this point, we have a node here, we have a node here, and then we have a node up here. So we've created these 4 nodes on the highway. At the far end, we're going to do the same thing. So if we zoom back out and go over to the west side of the island, or of the bay, you can see right here there's a point there that we're also going to split. So we're going to add a node right there. Okay. So now we have these junction points on existing links that are already were already in the network. So that was really easy to split those. Now we need to go ahead and add in some new nodes. So there's going to be a node right here for this merge diverge point. And then we have another diverge point right here that's going to require a node. So we're going to have to add in some new nodes. So to add in new nodes at these two locations, what we're going to need to do is make sure we have the insert mode selected on the network editor. So up in the upper left corner of the network editor, there's a little plus button that we're going to click. That's going to tell Visum that you need to add a new object rather than editing existing objects. Then we need to tell Visum what type of object we are inserting. So we need to make sure that we have the nodes object selected in the network editor list. And then all it is just a left click at that location. So we're going to add a node at that location, and then we'll move on to adding some links. So to insert new objects in Visum, by default, up in the upper left corner of the network editor, we have this edit mode selected. But what we'll need to do is switch over to the insert mode. Once we have the insert mode selected, it's going to want to insert links because we have links active. So we're going to have to left click on nodes and make sure that we have the nodes active. So now Visum is telling us wherever we left click, we want to insert a new node. So I'm just going to find this point right here. I'm going to left click on it to add a new node there. And I'm going to left click to add a new node at that location. When you're done adding nodes, you can click into insert mode. That's usually the first thing I will do so that I'm not accidentally left clicking somewhere and adding a random node somewhere in the network. So I'm just going to hit the insert mode, and then we can see that I can click on these and use the quick view to update them if I need to. In this case, since we're doing a static assignment, we don't need to configure control types or anything like that. But typically in the workflow, if you're running something like an SBA or some other dynamic assignment, then you might configure, these as unknown and these as what they need to be. Okay. We can turn off our points of interest layer just real quick to again make sure that we have the nodes in the right spots that we want them to be in. And now we should be able to start adding the links. So we're going to jump into the next step of the process, which is going to be to add some new links to the process. So we're going to select the links layer and make sure we're still on that insert node or insert mode button so that we're now creating new links. Now, how we create links in Visum is we have to draw them from one existing node to the other. So that's why you should always do your nodes first and then go back and add in the links afterwards because they have to connect to existing nodes in the network. So in this case, how we're going to create the new link is we're going to left click on the starting point of the node. And then we can left click as we build the link to create the geometry of the link. So in this case, it's going to be a curved ramp. So we can left click at points along that curve to create that curvature. And then the link is finished when we click on the destination node. So you'll see that here we're going to add in some intermediate points as we go, and then we're going to finish out the link by clicking on the destination node. Once we've configured the new links, we're going to go in and configure the parameters of those links using the link types and editing some of the details. But before I do that, what I want to do is I want to give us some practice just jumping into Visum, and we're going to build out a few of these links. So the first link I'm going to do is I'm going to do the link going from this new node that we drew to this new node that we drew. So I'm going to select the links layer. So now I'm editing or adding new links. Make sure you select the insert mode option. So now we're telling Visum we want to insert a new link. Now see my cursor has a little do not enter sign kind of thing because we're not hovering over an existing node. But if I put my cursor over one of the nodes that we previously built, you'll see it turns into a little bit of a plus sign. So I can click on that, and then I'll left click on that node, and then I'll just left click at various points along the course of the link. In this case, you don't have to be super detailed with it in terms of putting an intermediate point every 5 feet or anything like that. You just want to get the kind of the macro shape of it, because what we're most worried about is having an accurate length on the link, as opposed to having super high detail on the geometry if you're building the link by itself. Now, you could also import links from a shapefile that have a lot more detail, but for the purposes of the training today, we're just trying to get the general shapes down. For now, we're just going to select a link type that is called 71 ramps. And then since this is a two-way link, we're going to say the opposite direction is like the outward direction. So we have some preset link types that helps with the process down the road of filtering links and things like that. So you just want to make sure that you have the link type, the correct link type selected. We're still going to go back and configure those area types and facility types so that the procedure can assign things like capacities and speeds. We're also going to be creating a number of lanes, but we're going to do that in a minute. So first, I want to just make sure we create this link, select it as type 71, and then the opposite direction, since this has a link going in the opposite direction too, is going to be just the same. So it's also going to be 71. And then we're going to click OK for now. And that should create a new link for us. So if I turn off my points of interest, we should have a link going in this direction and a link going in this direction. Each have the type number 71. The next link I'm going to build is going to be for the bridge itself. So we are going to create a new link. I'm going to zoom in on one side or the other. You can either start from the east side or the west side. But since I split this road here, I'm going to left click along these points. It does seem that there is some curvature here, so I'm going to do this. Click there. Looks like something like that. I'm just kind of getting the general shape of it. And then I'm going to left click at this destination over here. In this case, this is going to be a freeway expressway, so number 11. We're going to click OK. So we should have our bridge link and then our on-ramp link selected. Okay. Now, if you need to redefine the link geometry, or maybe you put it in the wrong spot, or you can you feel like you can do a little bit better matching the geometry of the point of interest or something like that. There's a couple ways we can go about that. I'm going to turn off the points of interest just for a second so you can see what the link looks like. If you right click on the link, there's an option that says permit interactive editing of the geometry. So if we, again, if you right click on either direction in this case, if you select that option, it should be third from the top, permit interactive editing of geometry. That should turn on the visibility of these intermediate points that you can then grab and move. So if one of your intermediate points is way off, so for example, maybe this intermediate point needs to be right here, for example, and then I can shift these around and get my geometry a little bit closer to where it needs to be. You can also right click on the link and say add a new intermediate point. So if I do that, I can create a new intermediate point wherever I right click, and then you can left click and drag that intermediate point around and kind of update the geometry of the curve. So maybe I'm going to put this guy right here, right click, add a new intermediate point, and go like that. Now, if you completely want to rebuild the link without deleting it, maybe you just want to redefine all of the link geometry, you could also right click and say redefine link geometry here. And in this case, I clicked on the right side, so I'm picking the northbound movement. So you'll have to pay attention to the directionality of the link. And you'll see that it's starting right here. I have that solid black line. I can now come in and I can replace those link geometry points. And the benefit of doing this is that you can redefine the entire geometry of the link without upsetting any of the other attributes that you set. So for example, if you were to just delete the link and redraw it from scratch, you'd have to redefine the link types, or maybe you've already had some sort of user-defined attributes assigned to it that you don't want to have to redefine there. So this allows us to completely redraw the link without having to delete the link ahead of time. In this case, maybe our node could be shifted a little bit, so I can move my node up and get it a little bit more specific. And so now we have our link in place as needed. Okay, so now what we're going to do that we have these links in place is we want to edit the specific details about the links. Now for this particular model, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but the attributes that we need to update are going to be the lane numbers. And then in the user defined attributes tab, we're going to define the area type and the facility type for these specific links. And what this will do is this will update the procedures built in such a way that the scripts will look at these area types and facility types and update things like speeds and capacities. So once we get these three attributes in place, the number of lanes, area type, and facility type, Visum will take care of the rest for us. So all we need to do is update these values. And then since this is a two-way link, we don't have to do it for both directions. We can just click this transfer changes to the opposite direction button, and that will copy over the changes to the opposite direction. So in this case, this off ramp here is going to be if I double click on it, you can double click on either direction, but just be aware of which direction you have selected. So for example, I'm going to turn off that permit interactive editing part. So in this case, I have selected the northbound movement, right, as opposed to the southbound movement. So just be conscious of which side you've double clicked on. So if you double click, and in this case, this is the northbound movement, this is going to be a one lane section. And then in the user defined attributes area, we need to update the area type and there's a facility type right here. So we're going to update these two attributes in our network editor. And just so I can remember, it's going to be 31 and 23 respectively. So I'm going to update my area type to 31 and my facility type to 23. So we've updated these two values to 31 and 23 respectively. Okay. Okay. So now that we have our area type, facility type, and then in the basis section, we have just one lane, but we'd also define if that had multiple lanes there. We can hit this transfer to opposite directions button down in the lower left corner, and that will copy all of the values that we set in here over to the opposite direction. You can also just click the opposite direction button, and that will switch the arrow. So now we're editing the southbound movement, but we can see these values have already been updated. So again, for the bridge section, I'm going to double click. In this case, it's going to be 2 lanes, DUE, user-defined attributes, area type 31 and 23. And again, do the transfer changes to opposite direction button, and that should copy those changes over to the southbound or the westbound side. Turn my points of interest back on so we can see the ramp portions. Okay. Now that we have the two-way links taken care of, let's talk about one-way links for a minute. So in this part of the model, we're going to have 4 one-way links, one for each of the ramps. We're going to draw them in the direction of travel. So for the previous links, since they had 2 directions to them, we could draw them in either way. It didn't really matter. For one-way, typically you're going to want to draw it in the direction of travel. You can technically draw it in the opposite direction. It's just you'll have to remember to configure all of the attributes on the correct side. So for this, it's just easier if you draw it in the direction of travel. Otherwise, it's going to be fairly similar. We're going to define the link, and then for the type, we're going to select ramps. But the key thing here is that we're going to close the opposite direction and select a different type number for the closed link. In this case, the 00 type number. And this does 2 things. It will automatically shut off all transportation systems from being able to use the opposite direction, because in Visum, every link again has 2 directions, regardless of if it's a one-way link or not. So if it's a one-way link, the direction that is not available needs to be turned off by deselecting all transportation systems and having 0 lanes. So that's what we're going to do here by saying close opposite direction and giving it the type number 00. That will automatically do all those things for us so that we don't have to go in and do that. So again, we're going to draw the link in the direction of travel, and then when we select this create link option, we're going to give it a type number in the direction that we drew it, but in the opposite, close it out. And then in the editor, we're going to do all the same stuff. We're going to give it a number of lanes. We're going to give an area number, a facility type number. And so within this area, what we're going to see though is that there are going to be a lot of cells that are highlighted yellow. And in Visum, this editor, what it means by highlighting yellow is that the opposite direction has a different value than what you've entered here. So for example, if the number of lanes is 1 and it's highlighted yellow, that means that the opposite direction probably has 0 or more than 1 lane. In this case, it should have 0 lanes. And same thing goes for the area type and facility type. All right. So now we're going to get in and we're going to draw some of these or all of these off ramps. So in this case, we're going to make sure we have links selected, press the insert mode option. And then again, we want to draw in the direction of travel. So I can start with any one of these ramps. I'm just going to start with this one. I'm just going to get the general shape of it down. Again, we can always go back and add more detail to the geometry later if we need to. So in this case, again, I need to select that facility type 71 for ramps. And this is, since I drew it in the southbound direction, that means that the southbound movement is going to be 71. And so the quote unquote northbound movement on this link is closed because there shouldn't be a northbound movement. So I'm going to close that northbound movement. I'm going to select type 00. Now before I selected OK and closed out of this, but you can just go straight into the details by clicking the details button, and that'll just open up the link editor directly. So you can see that right now I am editing the southbound movement. And by editing that southbound movement, we can see what transportation systems are allowed here. We don't have to worry about that right now. The big thing is that the opposite direction has no transport systems. So when we click the opposite direction button and we're looking at the northbound, transport systems are zeroed out. We have one lane for this off-ramp portion, and then the user-defined attributes, again, area type 31 and facility type 23. And again, these are yellow because the opposite direction is still zeroed out. Now, this is a point in which you do not want to select the transfer changes because we just want this to be a one-way link. So I'm going to click OK. And then for this ramp, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to select the links and start inserting intermediate points as we go. Now, it remembered what I did last time, so 71 ramps, close the opposite direction, check the details. One lane, user-defined attributes, I'm going to do 31 and 23, and then click OK. Turn on my POIs so we can kind of see what we have so far. So we have this ramp, we have this two-directional link, and then we have this link as well. We do this one. Click details, make sure we have the correct area and facility type. Now, if you do end up drawing a link in the opposite direction of travel, you're not sunk. You can still continue working. So maybe you've spent a lot of time drawing a link for a long distance and then you realize, oh, I drew it backwards or something like that. That's okay. All you have to do is uncheck the close opposite direction, make sure that you swap out the facility types like this. The only difference is we don't have a closed primary direction option. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to come into the primary direction, just make sure that the appropriate direction has the transport systems. So in this case, it automatically picked up from type 00 that there should be 0 transport systems in this direction. And then if I click opposite, so that now we have this clockwise movement, we can see the transport systems and lanes in user-defined attributes. Now, if for some reason this isn't completely closed, maybe for example, there are transport systems selected here, that's an easy fix. All you have to do, if you see transport systems up above, you just click the transport systems button, hold the control key, and then you can deselect by left clicking on them all of these objects. And so you can just turn them off like that, and that will turn off that direction as well. So even if you've drawn the link incorrectly, that's still okay. You can still work from there. It just takes a little bit of effort to kind of clean it up a bit. So now, if I turn off my points of interest, we should have all of these movements coded in. We're not quite done yet. So the next step after we get the links and nodes put in, we're going to have to configure the turns of the various nodes. Because we have all these links going in different directions, there are going to be certain movements that we do not want to include. So for example, we can directly edit the turns by selecting the turns object and then clicking on that particular movement and then looking in the quick view window. And we can see things like turn type number, which will dictate whether it's a through movement, a left turn, or a right turn, or a U-turn. And then we're really going to be focusing on this transportation system set. So you want to make sure that the transportation system sets are either active or deactivated for those movements. So we could do that in the quick view window. We can also look in the turns list. So if we open up the turns list, we can do it there as well. Or we can do it in the Junction Editor. So if we select the nodes option and then double click on a node, it will open up a Junction Editor window, which will allow us to edit that that node and then select a specific turning movement for that junction. And basically what we're going to need to do in any one of these situations is select the transportation system set and then select none if we want to turn off the turn for a specific movement. And in this particular scenario, what we're concerned with are things like U-turns. For example, this northbound on-ramp going onto Highway 41, we don't want vehicles to merge on and then immediately flip a U-turn or something like that. For example, maybe that southbound ramp is really congested. So we can deactivate that turn. So you're going to have to go around and make sure that if there are any turning movements that are not allowed to turn them off. Another one might be like a left turn on an off ramp like this, where this might be a divided highway, but we've drawn it as one link. So in this case, we'll want to exclude that left turn because there's a barrier there. And so again, we can do that. One last note is that we had a question about this yesterday, but turn penalties are represented with T0 PRT. So in Visum, T0 represents the initial travel time, so the unloaded travel time through a turn. If you want to assign an initial turn penalty for private transportation, you would assign it at that T0 PRT level in minutes. You can also assign T0 PRT automatically in the procedure sequence based on the turn type number. So again, 1 is a left, 2 is a through, 3 is a right, and 4 is a U-turn, I believe. Maybe I had that the other way. Maybe it's 1 is right, 2 is through, 3 is left, and 4 is U-turn. So that's the final step that we need to do on this build to make sure that we have the physical attributes of this interchange set up. I'm going to select the turns object here on the left. Once you have the turns object active, when you hover over a link in a particular direction, you can see how it turns purple and then it shows all of the outbound movements from that link. So if I hover right here on this bridge, you can see on the right side all the outbound movements that are leading into that node. So in this case, we have a U-turn, we have a left turn, a through movement, and a right turn. So we're going to want to close off some of these movements. So the first one I want to look at is this left turn. And I'm going to use the quick view in this particular case, look at this left turn. So again, how we do that is I hover over the link in the direction travel. So I'm hovering over the link in the eastbound direction. I left click at that point, and then I can left click on whichever one of these movements I want to edit. So in this case, I have my right turn, I have my through movement, I have my left turn, and then I have my U-turn. So what I want to do is I want to left click on this turn here and then look over in the quick view window. And so here what we see is that we have a transportation system set and we have ... marked. If I click on that ... it'll pull up a transportation system set editor window. And we can see that none of the movements or none of the transportation systems are set. And the reason for that is because this link, we had already closed this link. So it knows automatically to close that turn. So that turn is automatically closed. But there are other turning movements where the links are not closed, but we still want to close that movement. So for example, if I click the eastbound movement and then click on the U-turn, both directions of this link have a transportation system set. So in this case, the TSYS set in the quick view window here is shown with all available transportation systems. So in this case, we're going to click that transportation system set and select none. And that'll just turn off all transportation systems. I click OK, I double check my quick view, and you can see that it is turned off. So basically no vehicles can find a path that utilizes that turn. Another movement type that we're going to look at is this off-ramp left turn, because again, we're concerned about movements that have both inbound and outbound links that have transportation system sets. So this off-ramp has transportation system, it's not closed. And then this portion here is also not closed. So it has a transportation system set selected, so I can click none. Similarly, I want to close this through movement. And then there's also this turning movement here for this on-ramp, and then the U-turn for the on-ramp. I'll want to close that off. So for this node, I've done this whole node right here just manually in the network editor by selecting the different turning movements. So I've clicked here and click here. That's our right turn. Then we have our through movement is active. This left turn should be deactivated, and then we should have deactivated the right turn as well. And you can see just visually that the U-turn is really skinny, and the movements that are allowed are typically more thick movements. Now another way we can look at this is in the Junction Editor. So I'm going to edit one of these other junctions just directly in the Junction Editor by selecting the nodes object. And then we can double click on any one of these nodes. So I'm just going to pick this one for now. So I'm going to double click this little diverge point here. And in the Junction Editor, we can kind of see a more detailed view of the intersection. And then on the left, we can see that we can do different views. So we can see the node view, we can see the links view, turns view, geometry, specific geometry, signal timing, turning volumes, things like that. So we get a few different views in this Junction Editor window. Now, in the Junction Editor, under the nodes section, we get all the node information that we saw before. You know, what control type is it? Does it have an initial capacity? Things like that. In the links view, this gives us access to all the information about any of the inbound and outbound active links. So for example, if I highlight this row, this is that on-ramp, that cloverleaf on-ramp. This is that ramp that kind of spirals off to the north. This is the southbound movement of the southern leg, and this is the northbound movement of the southern leg. So we can click and see all of the active links, and you can actually edit them. So you can change the number of lanes. We could access those facility types and area types. So you can come into the Junction Editor and do all those same edits that you did in the network editor, but just at the intersection level if you wanted to. The view for turns is the one I'm interested in then, though, because instead of having to identify and click through all the turns, it shows all of the currently active turns that would be in the network. And so I can just quickly go through and identify, okay, we have 4 particular movements that are active. Now, in the actual network, we should only have 2. We should have this cloverleaf off ramp that comes around going southbound, and then we should have this on ramp going northbound on Highway 41. These other 2 movements that we have are extra movements that we don't need. And I can actually click on the column and see what movements they are. In this case, this is kind of a U-turn, but it's not quite a U-turn because it's not ending up on the same link, so it's been defined as a left turn. So in this case, I'm going to identify that left turn that I do not want to have active. And just like before, I'm going to click this transportation system set option, select none, and then click OK. And that will physically remove it from the junction editor for me. I can do the same thing for this U-turn. So I can select none and click OK. So now you should only have these 2 turns active at this junction. Once the junction is complete, you can close the junction editor and move on to the next node. You could also click the geometry button real quick and zoom out, and it'll kind of give you a different view of what's going on. I'm going to close out junction editor though real quick, and I'm just going to find a different one. I'm going to come over to this node down here, double click on it, go to the turns section. And in this case, we have a lot of turns that are active. And it can be easy instead of having to click through if you just look at the turn type number. So turn type here, 0 is none, right, straight, left, U-turn. So in this case, this is a through movement. And so I can quickly find those U-turns by just looking for the number 4. So if I see a number 4, I click on it. Okay, that's my U-turn there. I'm going to turn that one off. I see this one is a number 4. That's a U-turn. Turn it off. Since this is a merge area, I also see a left turn, which is kind of weird. So I'm going to turn that one off. So here we should have a through movement from the freeway to the freeway, a through movement from the on-ramp to the off-ramp, and then a through movement or from the on-ramp to the highway, and then we have a highway to the highway going northbound. So we have those 3 movements edited. Some of you might be asking though, what happens if I accidentally close a turn that I wasn't intending on closing? What if we accidentally close this through movement? How do we get it back? Well, the easiest way to do that in the junction editor is just to right click in the white space down here, just right click anywhere and say show also closed turns. So if I right click and say show also closed turns, that will show all of the deactivated turns. So by default, the deactivated turns just aren't visible. And so here, by right clicking and saying show also closed turns, you can quickly find the turns that have been deactivated and they're shown with dashes here. You just find that through movement and then come in here and you select, in this case, HOV, SOV, and trucks. So HOV, SOV, I'm going to hold control and then find my trucks and click OK. And now that turn should be opened back up. And then if you want to turn those closed turns off again, you can just right click and say show that off and it'll turn them back off. So if you accidentally block a link that you or a turn that you didn't mean to block, that's the easy way to go, is just come into the junction editor, right click, show closed turns. If you do that in the main editor, so I have turns active, right? And I can, let's say I accidentally block this through movement. All you have to do is just reselect that turning movement, and then you can reselect the vehicles that are needed to go through there. So I'm just going to go through and make sure that all of these movements are turned off. That's our through, so I can turn off this guy, turn off this guy. Another way you can move around is on the turns. If I zoom out a little bit, you can see how I have these 3 blue dots that you can click on. So these represent the next node downstream. So for example, I come in here, I edit, here's my southbound through. I can turn off this movement, and then I can turn off this U-turn movement, and I turn off this U-turn movement. Okay, so I've done all the turns at this node, and instead of closing the junction editor and moving on to the next node, I can just move on to the next node by clicking this blue dot. And so if I want to go southbound, for example, I find the southbound leg, it's pointing at this blue dot, I click this, it'll jump to the next node, which in this case is an intermediate node. Maybe there's a number of lanes that are dropping or something like that. And so it actually has U-turns in the middle of the link, and we don't want that. So I'm going to turn those off. And then I go to the next node. Okay, we've already edited this node. I can go to the bridge, and we see that we have all these movements. This left turn here needs to be turned off. And then we only have our through movements. Okay, so then I can zoom out a little bit. We can go to the off ramp. We can go to this ramp. Okay, here we go. So real quickly, you can move around pretty quickly by just clicking as opposed to having to exit out every single time and come back in. Once you're confident you have all these turning movements, we need to go double check the opposite side of the bridge. So I need to go double check that all the turns over here are active. In this case, if I click this, we have our right turn, our through movement. Maybe we don't want our U-turns, so I'm going to turn those off. We have our southbound right, our southbound left. We don't want a U-turn. And then we have our eastbound, turn off the U-turns. So now we've gone through and we've edited we've added in the new nodes. We've updated the link structure. So now we have our new links edited in, and we've activated or deactivated all the turning movements that we want. And so now if we were to rerun the assignment, there would be new path options available to some of the vehicle types, HOVs, SOVs, whatever vehicle types or transportation systems that we activated onto these links. They can find those in their path sets, and we can see how the path flows would shift from there. And that should complete our new build option. So before I go on to the next scenario, just real quick to review, we can obviously save this file. And then we can do a file comparison. So I'm going to hit File, Save As. I have a 2022 build. I'm going to call it V2 Complete. I'm going to hit Save. It'll take a second to save it. And I can go into File, Compare and Transfer Networks. Compare current network with a version file. So I can always go back and identify, okay, where is my 2015 initial build option? Click Open. That initial build is the base file. I click OK. It'll run through our editor. And now I can see, okay, what has been updated? And it'll only show in this list, it'll show only what has been changed. So in this case, we have links. We added 28 links. We deleted 6 of them. Nodes, we inserted 7 new nodes. And then turns, we inserted 90 new turns, and you can go ahead and see what has been updated or what has been changed in the network. So for example, I can identify what nodes have been updated on the map. So if I'm up my transfer file window on the side here, like this, I can click through and see what nodes have been updated or edited in the network. And so this is a great way to help track changes through your various scenarios.